what do we really want to thank, right? We want to thank the people of New Hampshire, right? Do we love the people of New Hampshire? You know, I said it, and I said it even a year ago. I said, I think I'm going to do really well there.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was Donald Trump speaking in New Hampshire after winning the primary in the Granite State by a huge margin. Now his rivals and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are duking it out in South Carolina. To discuss it all is former White House advisor to George W. Bush and chairman of the Republican National Committee, Ed Gillespie.
Raymond, good to be
Great
back
to see you. Thanks so much for being here. And I want your take on what we're seeing here. What, in your opinion, is Trump's largest threat in South Carolina? Is someone a real challenger to him? Or are we to believe these polls that he's up 16% and he sort of can't be touched?
Well, I think he's up. He came out of New Hampshire strong, and you often see that in South Carolina. The person who comes out of New Hampshire gets a bump there. There is about 10 days between the two, and that can dissipate, and that's obviously what the remaining candidates are going to hope. They're going to stake their claim. We've seen them doing their town hall meetings and barnstorming South Carolina today, and I think Donald Trump is the front runner, but I think that there are folks who are going to make a very strong case there, and they're going to continue on into Nevada and into the SEC primary as well. I don't think this is going to be resolved in South Carolina, but South Carolina will, as it always does, have a big impact.
A decisive role, yeah. This is Donald Trump from a rally the other night, 10,000 people plus, and he lashed out at Governor Jeb Bush.
I'll tell you, you have a guy like Bush who has this big fund. It's terrible. I'll be honest. The last thing we need is another Bush. That I can tell you. Remember I called him a low-energy person? He's a low-energy person. I said he's a stiff, and I said that if he was in the private sector, he wouldn't be able to get a job. Other than that, I think he's excellent. This is going to be our president. The only reason I mention it is that he spent $20 million. In fact, I told him, I said, if they ever stop spending money on negative ads, I'll stop talking about the guy because I hate to waste time on this guy because he's not going to win.
What is the staying power of Donald Trump, and what do you make of that? Does that hurt Jeb Bush?
Well, what it shows you is that Governor Bush got momentum out of New Hampshire as well, and that's why Donald Trump has turned his sights back to Jeb Bush. We've seen consistently during the course of this nominating process that when Donald Trump hears footsteps, he turns and he fires at those he hears some footsteps from. And, the fact is, I think Jeb Bush has a chance to perform well in South Carolina and build on the momentum that he established in New Hampshire. And obviously that's what he's banking on, as are, Ted Cruz and John Kasich and Marco Rubio.
It was a rather amazing showing. When you look at these exit polls in New Hampshire, every demographic tilted to Trump. Did you expect this?
Well, he actually outperformed his polls in New Hampshire, unlike in Iowa. And, one of the things we're seeing is polling is not proving to be a very reliable indicator of, what to expect. But New Hampshire was clearly a very good state for Donald Trump. And I think South Carolina is probably a decent state for him as well in terms of the demographics and the issues that are likely to resonate. But it's still pretty wide open. Although I think it's fair to say and safe to say at this point that Donald Trump is the front runner for the nomination.
Yeah. If he takes South Carolina, is he almost unstoppable?
I don't know that he's almost unstoppable, but clearly somebody at that point is going to have to really perform well in Nevada. But we have to realize, even when March is done and the first four primaries are done, only 5% of the delegates have been voted. And so there's 95% out there, and you've got the SEC Super Tuesday primaries, and those will be pretty important as well. And you've got to have broad organization to compete in those. And I think that's still a question mark for Donald Trump is he putting organization on the ground to convert the energy and excitement that you see in these rallies to votes? He did it in New Hampshire. Did not do it in Iowa. Maybe he learned there, and he'll do more.
I was amazed that this past week he went to Louisiana. He went to Florida in the midst of campaigning in South Carolina.
Right.
A smart move, I guess, getting ahead of the ball and sort of whipping up energy and excitement before those next primaries.
Trying to leapfrog a little bit and lay the groundwork, and it is, I do think it makes sense, actually.
I want to show you this. This is Trump and Cruz came out yesterday with ads attacking each other. Now, this is the Cruz ad with children who are playing with a Donald Trump doll.
Look, I got the Trump action figure.
No way, that's huge.
What does he do? He pretends to be a Republican.
I like bailouts for the banks.
Too big to fail. I gave money to Pelosi, Reid, and Anthony Weiner.
Hey, Hillary, I'll give you money to be my friend.
Check out my house, Mr. Trump. That's a lousy house. I'm gonna take your house with eminent domain and park my limos there. Eminent domain!
Is this effective? Does this hurt Donald Trump, or does it sort of bounce off of him? It doesn't seem the negative ads. I mean, he was attacked by them in New Hampshire, in Iowa. It didn't take a death toll on him.
Well, it's interesting to try a little humor and to try to punch through the way the Cruz campaign is doing with this spot. And I do think eminent domain, it showed itself in the last debate as it flared as a concern, I think, for Donald Trump. And I think Cruz has probably seen some data, I suspect, somewhere that says that there's an opening there to exploit.
Yeah.
The question is, like you said, does it stick or does it just bounce off? And maybe as the field gets smaller, these things will stick more than they have in the past, but they may not.
70% of the voters in South Carolina are evangelical, self-declared faithful voters, not evangelicals, but faithful voters. Does Cruz have enough of a hold on them to make at least a second place showing here, or possibly win?
Well, Trump did well with them in New Hampshire, but it's a much smaller segment of the electorate in New Hampshire. Obviously, Cruz has focused a lot of his campaign energy on the evangelical vote and people of faith. That served him well in Iowa, where 62% of the vote were evangelicals. This is a happier hunting ground in South Carolina in that regard. And at the same time, you've had Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum drop out.
Right.
And so the lane is a little less crowded there as well. But he won't be the only one making a play for those voters. We hear in this election cycle people talking about their faith pretty openly. And that includes Marco Rubio and John Kasich and Jeb Bush as well.
Yeah. Speaking of Jeb Bush, he finished 4th in New Hampshire. He's hoping to use that momentum in South Carolina. Now, this is Jeb on MSNBC when asked if he thought he needed to direct some of his fire at John Kasich, who might once again steal Bush's thunder in South Carolina as well. Here's what he said.
Well, he has nothing going on down here, best we can tell. He had a one-state strategy, and it was effective, and I commend him for the campaign he ran in New Hampshire. But he's not as conservative as me, and his record is not nearly as good as mine.
He claims that there's not much of a ground game here for Kasich. Where does Jeb go? Does Jeb have enough of a ground game? The Bushes in the past, as you know, did very well in South Carolina. Is that machinery still in place to ensure some sort of victory for Jeb Bush?
Well, I'm not sure, and I don't know. I do know that Governor Kasich did push all his chips onto the table in New Hampshire, and banking on coming out of there, being able to get momentum and capitalize, and with 10 days, between the two, try to build something there in South Carolina, and then go on to the Super Tuesday. And for him, obviously, he's looking a little further down the road, I would think, March 8, where you have some of the more Midwestern states like his own and Michigan. But I'm not, it's an interesting bet that he's made, and he did execute, I would say, pretty flawlessly, John Kasich, on his New Hampshire strategy. I assume he's got, a strategy to parlay that into a victory somewhere else. But it'd be interesting to see where he goes.
Yeah, will it come too late? Is this another Giuliani situation where he kept saying, "Oh, Florida's coming. That's going to be my," and then he never made it.
But Kasich did get a notch a win here and a big one, or second place finish in New Hampshire. The question is there somewhere between New Hampshire and Michigan that he can rack up another win, or at least keep delegates going again, because a lot of these primaries are proportionate delegate allocation. Delegate allocation.
And Kasich has already said he probably won't win South Carolina. He came out and said that on the stump. So we'll see what happens there. I need to play this for you. This is an exchange between Marco Rubio and Christie. This was from the last debate in New Hampshire, a critical debate for Marco Rubio.
And let's dispel once and for all with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing.
You see, everybody, I want the people at home to think about this. That's what Washington, D.C. does. The drive-by shot at the beginning with incorrect and incomplete information, and then the memorized 25-second speech that is exactly what his advisors gave him.
facts. Here's the bottom line. This notion that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing is just not
There
true.
it is.
He knows exactly
there it is,
what he's
the memorized 25-second speech.
Well, that's the
there it is,
reason why
everybody.
this.
Let's talk about Chris Christie for a moment. Christie has left the race. One of the most talented political guys out there. I mean, he did everything right in New Hampshire. 40 days, working the hustings, town hall meetings. Why didn't it work for him?
First of all, I agree with you. He's a real talent on the hustings and on the stump and in those town hall meetings. And I think if it were, another year where there was not such a crowd, and in particular kind of a crowd, I mean, he was vying for, many of the same votes that John Kasich and Jeb Bush, to a lesser extent Marco Rubio, were all vying for there in New Hampshire. There just aren't enough votes to go around at some point. And I think what we saw in this exchange, which is often the case in these political contests, is that Christie did, I think, do some damage to Marco Rubio in that exchange. But at the same time, he wasn't the prime beneficiary of that damage.
Right.
Probably Kasich and Jeb were. And that's not unique. We've seen that in the past in multi-candidate races. The person who inflicts some damage isn't necessarily the beneficiary of the damage inflicted.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some are saying it was because of that exchange that Christie went down in the polls, that he hurt himself. But if you spent any time watching the race in New Hampshire, the negative ads against Christie by the Rubio super PACs and everybody else's, that, it seems to my eye, that's what did him in more than this. This was actually a victory for him.
No, he was subject to a lot of weight in terms of commercials and from the Rubio campaign. I suspect that may be why, had a contributing factor to why he drew a bead on Marco Rubio in the debate. But I think you're right. I don't think it was that debate exchange that cost him in New Hampshire. I think it was the weight of those ads.
What about Marco Rubio? He's now talking. I mean, I saw a town hall he had in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and he's talking about, I'm the only guy who did anything about Obamacare. He's trying to sort of build up the resume. Will it work, or has so much damage been inflicted that he really can't recover, that he becomes sort of branded in the way that Trump branded Jeb Bush?
Yeah, well, we saw Jeb Bush was able to come back from that, the low energy attacks early on in the campaign.
Trump's renewing it.
Yeah, he's renewing it, but he has to because he was able to come back. And, politics, as you know, in campaigns, not a linear line, a lot of ups and downs. And I think we'll see now with Marco Rubio, he is responding clearly, I think, to what happened in New Hampshire. And that's reflected in his comments and his approach. He's a very talented candidate as well, and I think he's drawing a bead on some things in South Carolina that resonate, in particular, national security and foreign policy.
Ed Gillespie, you were the Republican National Committee chairman. You are probably most versed in this, so I want to ask you this question. Rubio's campaign manager is saying, we're probably looking at a contested convention. Do you think that's what we're looking at here? Or is that just an effort by the Rubio campaign to sort of wake up donors in a critical moment?
I'm not sure. I do think, given the size of the field, the nature of the delegate allocation being proportional for much of these contests in March, that is certainly a possibility unless the field winnows further. But I also would not be surprised if by the middle of April we had a nominee who's essentially clinched enough delegates to claim the nomination.
Can the rules be changed at the last minute? If there was something, you can't change it. They're set.
No, the rules are set. You play by the rules that are set, and you can't go back and change them.
Even from the floor, even if there's some crisis where you don't have anybody with a...
Well, I'm not certain of it, but I don't believe so. What you would have in that instance, if nobody claims a majority of delegates for the nomination, it would be a contested nomination, and I'm pretty sure that the delegates are only bound on the first ballot, and then it's... then it would be Katie bar the door. But I'm not so sure that's what's going to happen. These things tend to sort themselves out. And, what people were predicting just 2 weeks ago.
Have evaporated
exactly.
today. Right. But so we'll see. The first man to get 1,237 delegates is the victor here.
Yes.
Okay. Final question. You've got Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton duking it out. Obviously, 55% of the Democratic voting bloc is African American. The Black Congressional Caucus just backed Hillary Clinton. Is that decisive? Will she pull this one out?
I don't know that it's decisive. It's clearly a big factor in the Democratic Party's nominating process. But I think you're seeing now Senator Sanders begin to work that segment of the primary electorate. And, you know, I think she's in for a pretty tough slog and for a real fight, and I'm not sure she's going to be the nominee. I suspect she is, but I'm not sure.
Okay, final question. If you had to guess today, who do you think will be the nominee for the Republican Party?
You know, honestly, I could not venture a guess. I have never seen kind of such turmoil and lack of clarity and a crystal ball that when you look into it is nothing but a cloud in there.
Well, in the days to come, it will become clearer. Ed Gillespie, thanks for being here.